We often like to drink whiskey with our dads or granddads or our sons or daughters, but how often do we get to make whiskey with the members of our family? The Russells are 3 generations making whiskey at Wild Turkey. I think you're the only 3-generation family in bourbon country, possibly in whiskey.
I know me and Jimmy, the only active master distiller, father and son. With Bruce coming along, I'd say 3 generations is probably the only one.
Yes.
And Eddie and I are the only 2 father and son working. It's in the Bourbon Hall of Fame.
I didn't realize that. Now, do y'all have a good working relationship and a good relationship at home, or do you butt heads sometimes?
They have a good relationship. Jimmy and me get along a lot better now than we used to. We used to butt heads quite a bit, but it was all about just trying to make the best whiskey. Of course, his tastes are a little different from mine. You know, Bruce has come along. He loves the rye and promotes it a lot. Jimmy doesn't like rye at all. So I tell people it's really cool to have 3 different generations, and all those sort of have a different taste profile. So it's really neat at Wild Turkey having 1 recipe for bourbon, 1 recipe for rye, and 3 different thoughts of how it should taste.
My granny makes them get along at home.
Is she the real head of?
Oh, she's
better believe it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we all know that.
What have you had any very memorable disagreements at work with regards to the whiskey, where you put your foot down and he put his foot down, and somehow you had to come to a compromise?
Well, I think, you know, it took a while for him to realize I wasn't going to mess it up too bad. But, you know, for me, as I come along, Jimmy was Mr. 101, that Southern gentleman who he promoted to, and I came along and wanted to promote to younger people. So doing the 81, he was like, yeah. And when I said it was a mixable bourbon, he's like, no. Because, you know, for him, it's put a piece of ice in it. But I think that was just the difference in the generations and difference in who we were trying to promote to. I'd never want to miss out on the generations that he promoted to, but I did want a younger generation to come in the category. So there was always sort of disagreements, but, you know, I always knew he was in charge, so that worked out pretty good.
Especially when we got home to eat. Then you know who was in charge. Mama.
Well, and it took Jimmy 34 years to trust you enough to make you co-master distiller. Jimmy, what was it about that span of time? Why did it take so long? I mean, clearly Eddie got the experience much sooner.
He's been that for years, just didn't have the title. That's something in our business that usually you just have one at a distillery. And I guess we're the first 2 that's ever been 2 master distillers at one distillery. It's just one of those things that usually you don't have another master distiller till the other one leaves.
What convinced you that he was ready?
Well, it was time. It's been time that, you know, he'd been there long enough and make sure that he had that title.
Yeah, it was, I mean, I can remember years ago that they told Jimmy, we'd like to call you Master Distiller Emeritus and Eddie Master Distiller. And he's like, nope, I'm not retiring. And then it just came a time, I mean, he talked about it a lot during his 60th anniversary. And that year was about him. So we were like, no, let's wait till next year. So, I mean, I've been doing the work for a long time. But, I mean, Jimmy's been the Master Distiller there since the 60s. So, you know, there was no hurry. I didn't mind doing the work.
Bruce, do you think you will get to be the third? It'll be a trifecta of master distillers, or
There won't be 3 because Dad's going to retire, and then it'll just be me and Mimi. So we might have 2 again one day. Maybe in 30 years it'll be me and Mimi.
We were talking earlier with Bruce and Jimmy about, you know, how he is going to start his real training in earnest. Are you excited that Bruce is coming back to actually put his hands into the making of the whiskey day to day?
I'm super excited because, you know, I think I've learned how mine and Jimmy's relationships work, you know, to try to help him out as much as I can. But, you know, it's always exciting to see they want to actually learn it. I mean, there's not too many master distillers that learned it like Jimmy or I did, just from the ground up, you know. So him coming back and getting his hands dirty is going to be a really exciting time for us.
Do you think you're going to run into the same problem that you and Jimmy had, where you and Bruce might disagree about how to do things or
Well,
decisions?
I don't think so, as long as he doesn't try to change what Jimmy's built, because he's built the brand. I want to keep doing the things I'm doing with my Master's Keep series and single barrels and things like that. For me, my advice to him is, you can never be Jimmy or Eddie. You have to be Bruce. So, stick with what we built, but show your own way.
Bruce, what do you hope for in your career as you move forward?
First and foremost, not to screw up what he's done. As we talked about before, I stole it from Dad. He'll haunt us till the day we die, if we do. I think it's to carry on the tradition of making what we consider kind of pre-prohibition style bourbon, that traditional stuff where we distill low, we put it to the barrel low proof, best ingredients, really good yeast. But also kind of put my own spin on it. I'm kind of known as a rye person, so I'll probably do a little bit more with the rye whiskey. I'm a little bit more towards Dad as far as being a little bit more experimental on the whiskeys that I like, but my palate is way more in line with Mimi. So I think you'll see kind of a combination of their styles that I've taken from them.
What is the best piece of advice, Eddie, that you've ever gotten from your dad?
Well, I think the main thing that always stuck out was, if you're going to do it right or don't do it. I mean, that was always his saying from day one. And, sometimes he probably didn't think I was doing it right, but I was really trying to. So I think that's basically it. If, I could have stayed there and been a warehouse supervisor, barrel inventory manager for the rest of my life, and probably been happy. I enjoyed it. I enjoy working in the warehouse and picking out the barrels, but learning all of it and becoming the master distiller, to where you have your hands in a little bit of all of it, that's really neat.
Jimmy, what has Eddie done that has made you proud?
Well, the main thing is keeping consistent, doing the right thing, and now working in the field, traveling, doing a lot of traveling, and promoting it the way he promotes the bourbon. People thinks a lot of him out anywhere you go out in the field. Talks about what a job he's doing and all. That's what he's just been on a trip now, and he's doing most of the traveling now, and the people all over the world.
I just go out and tell stories on him. So. Him and Booker and Elmer and Parker.
Now, is there anybody keeping an eye on you the way he and Fred know? We're talking earlier about how he keeps an eye on Fred. He used to tattle on him to Booker. Has anyone ever come to you and said, "Oh, Eddie was misbehaving"?
No.
The sad part for me was I was always the new guy, the youngest guy. If I do outlast Jimmy, which is probably not going to happen, I would be the oldest tenured guy. And that's just amazing to me now.
Yeah.
It's just amazing to see that now. It's so special, though. I mean, Booker was Jimmy's best friend. I've known Freddie since I was a kid. To see Freddie the Fourth and Bruce come along, it makes you really proud that they want to get into it, because as he's learned a lot this year, you're not a 9-to-5 guy. You're 24/7 basically, and you're doing a lot of traveling and promoting and talking, not only just making whiskey and picking out whiskey. So there's a lot to it. A lot of young people don't want to get into that.
Bruce, that's a lot of responsibility for you, not just the schedule, but the fact that you are carrying this legacy, and frankly, you're a little bit of bourbon royalty. I mean, I think it's hard to say that when you've got two such humble men, who've come before you, but these are well-known and beloved people in the bourbon world. And how does that feel that you're stepping into that path yourself?
Oh, it's such a weird thing to think about, because it's Dad and Mimi. I grew up around them. We don't think of ourselves that way. I just want to make sure that the whiskey that we continue to make, whether it's Dad's master distiller and I'm working under him, or maybe one day if I'm in charge of making it, that we're putting out stuff we can be proud of, and that he would always have been proud of. I think that's the most important thing, is that the whiskey itself. Everything else will take care of itself.
So the whiskey that we're drinking now is Master's Keep Decades, which was one of your projects, Eddie. And this is a combination of 10 to 20-year-old whiskey. It was just named, it's the 2017 Whiskey Advocate #3 Whiskey of the Year. And it's kind of different for a bourbon, I think, in that it has a complexity that belies the fact that, it's a mixture of ages. It's really greater than the sum of its parts. It also seems, in a way, kind of poetic that it is, spanning of many years of making whiskey that you and your dad have been there.
And I think that's what's really neat about it. 86% of it's 13, 14, and 15-year-old. And as you know, we don't like whiskey that's real old. But I had a few barrels, evidently, I hid for myself and forgot about, of 20-year-old. They went in there, and then I added some 10 to it. It's really my taste profile at the beginning, but what I loved about it was that super long finish that Jimmy always loved. Without him, I wouldn't be here for several reasons, but definitely not in the bourbon business. So it sort of hit everything for me. Not only that creamy sort of soft sweetness up front, but that nice spice in the back that just lingers and lingers with a good clean finish. When I started tasting the barrels, I taste them individually and then sort of blend together to get my profile. And when I started tasting the single barrels, I called our corporate office and I said, I want all of my whiskey to taste like this. Can I sell these as single barrels? And they're like, no. I said, people will pay extra, we can sell them. And it's like, well, this could be my next master's keep. And then as I got to look, and you have to sort of think about, I'm doing a series, so what is the catch to this? A lot of this came out of 3 warehouses, but doing that decades because, he's 6 decades. I'm getting close to 4 decades. So, having that 20 and 10 in there is sort of the edges of it with that mainly 13, 14, 15-year-old. It worked out perfect.
It's a beautiful, beautiful bourbon. Well, I want to ask one more question. I'd love to hear an answer from everybody, but we'll start with Jimmy. Jimmy, what's your hope for the future of Wild Turkey and for the Russells as the distillers?
Well, to continue to grow, keep the same product, good taste, good finish, good product, and a family business, staying in it. Say the 3 of us sitting there, and our granddaughter's over there. So it's actually, they're actually the 4th generation at the Wild Turkey Distillery. Actually, they're the 5th. They're the 5th generation in the bourbon business. My grandfather was in the bourbon business, but he didn't work for the Wild Turkey Distillery. But actually, all 4 of had worked. My dad worked at the Wild Turkey Distillery. Edie's working there, and Bruce and Joanne's working there.
Who else worked there?
Huh?
Who else worked there?
My mama. Your mama did. She worked there before I did.
Yeah, my grandmother worked there.
Wow.
Yeah, Edie's mama. She worked there. And so we've been involved with Wild Turkey since the early 50s.
And so you hope that same thread of consistency is just going to continue
on.
Indefinitely. What about you, Bruce?
I hope me, Dad, and Mimi just make some really killer whiskey. I'm excited to get back to the distillery, start getting my hands dirty, but also to see what we're going to continue to do. I think we've put out some of the most unique and some of the best stuff on the market in the past few years. I think that's just going to continue. I'm really excited about the next Master's Keep that Dad's going to put out next year. He's got a lot in the works. Yeah, it's going to be very exciting.
That's in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my Master's Keep, I want to do about every year to year and a half. Of course, corporate and maybe even consumers want it quicker, but it has to be something special. So it takes me about 18 months from the start to the finish. For me, it's, continuing what I'm doing. Jimmy built Wild Turkey with 101 and Rare Breed, but, my Master's Keep series, the Russell's line, that's very important to us because, it came out for Jimmy's 45th anniversary, but it's something I've added rye to, I've added single barrel to, just to keep that good whiskey and a little bit different, but same recipe, show my style and then helping Bruce along his path to see what his style is going to be without messing up Jimmy's original style.
We want to keep it as a family in the bourbon business and separate a family as our own family. That's one thing. We want to be our own family at home, but then again, be the bourbon family too.
Well, I've always felt like I was part of the family, coming down to the distillery,
Thank
feeling
you.
so welcome. And
That's what we hope to make everybody feel like when they come visit with us, part of the family.
Well, I think you've done it. And if this is what being part of the family means, then I'm very happy to be in there.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you guys so much
Thanks
for
for
coming in.
talking
It's
to us.
really been a pleasure. Thank you for sharing your stories and your family with us.
You're very welcome.